Hello there, Pursuing Freedom friends. Thanks for tuning in today. If it's your first time here, welcome aboard. This is your host, Erin Bradley. And if you've been listening for a while, you know I love and appreciate you and your support, and you will not be disappointed with today's conversation with Mr. Paul Graham. So Paul and I connected not too long ago when I had the opportunity to be a guest on his show, The Investor's Guide to Joy. And he's such a wealth of knowledge and so much great energy that I had to insist that he take the time out of his busy schedule to be on this podcast and share some inspiration and some actionable strategies with you about his path to financial independence and how he's helping others do the same. So Paul used to be a commercial real estate broker who transitioned into the software side of the real estate space. And then he started using his W-2 income to purchase properties in the greater Austin area to ultimately escape the everyday rat race. And most recently, he's relocated to Nashville. And after his personal experience of being lost in this wealth building trap, he started the podcast, The Investor's Guide to Joy, talking to accredited investors about mindset, lifestyle, perspective, strategy, and everything in between. So we have a lot to unpack today. And I have a feeling by the end of it, you're going to want to be reaching out to Paul to pick his brain and get to know more about him. So with no further ado, thank you, Paul, for taking the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. And it's exciting too, because yes, we're recording again, this time on your podcast, and I'm in Nashville. So I made the move. And so I'm here, not necessarily a new me, but definitely a new season. So
I love it. Well, let's start from the beginning, Paul. Give us a little bit about the backstory from the horse's mouth, as they say. I don't even know what that expression means, but let's hear a little bit about the backstory and how you got to where you are today, beginning the next chapter of Paul Graham in Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, you highlighted a lot of like the key pieces, but I'll share like super early childhood pieces because they're just fun to share, and then one or two, pivotal moments. So I got in trouble in third grade for selling keychains on school grounds. And I told the principal, I'm so sorry, I'm not selling keychains. I'm actually just doing these kids a nice gesture by taking their quarters and giving them keychains. My mom, who was a principal at the time, just said, hey, yeah, we'll just make sure he's not doing that anymore. And so there's always been this sense of like serving and helping others. And so, I've done that either for myself, and then especially now there's the concept of definitely like giving back, mainly because I have this thing called time. I have more time to be able to like give back to people. But I've always wanted to like be a millionaire by 30. In basically a month, I'll be 31. And although I'm not at that like millionaire type standpoint, and granted, I had some real estate depreciation come through with the market, right? Austin was doing really good until it wasn't, and then a business deal that fell through and lost a couple $100,000. It's really just to say like, who am I? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And by all means, do I enjoy it? And do I have time freedom to do the other things as life comes up, right? With, parents, with friends, with just life itself. Like I went to Formula One in Austin a couple weeks ago. I'm fortunate where my girlfriend like runs the main grandstand, so it's kind of a cheat code. But that was such an incredible experience. And I was like, yeah, no, we're just gonna like do this. So in a lot of ways, just my story's always been like focused on, real estate, former commercial real estate broker, have my own portfolio, love real estate, but I love investing in it, not like being in it as a broker. And, have really just found a bunch of tactical ways for people to leverage their finances to uncover more joy, because believe that's like the true thing we should focus on is joy. And we have the most amount of joy when we have time freedom. So a little bit about my life, and then fast forward, hey, we're in Nashville. I was in Austin for 5 years and grew up in Denver. Love Colorado. So I'm excited to see some snow here whenever it snows here. But that's, my life and what I'm doing, and just kind of following the coincidences of the world. So
let's take it a little more granular, because I love the 30,000 foot view, but talk us through the step by step. How did you start turning your active income into passive? Were you doing buy and hold residential? Were you buying buildings? What does your investment journey looked like?
And I love the tactical because I'm an analytical spreadsheets guy. So I'll keep it like level 5 as opposed to like level 0.5. Otherwise, I'll start bringing out spreadsheets. My senior year of college, I learned how just debt to income ratio and investments basically work. and wrote a senior thesis on the best practices of commercial real estate brokers, because I was just looking to figure out how to buy, how to just do the real estate, whatever the real estate was. Ended up buying my first property in October of 2016. It was a residential condo that I then rented out and kind of like house hacked or condo hacked. I don't even know if condo hacking is a word, but let's make it one. Kind of held that for a little bit. Was in software, founded my own company, moved back into my parents temporarily because I just needed to save money. And so I used that income from an additional renter to, well, make income. So that helped things. As things progressed on, I kept going for very like, not necessarily high profile, but just they really moved the ball down the field in terms of income. So in a way to share, I was able to double my W-2 income in 4 years. And it's because I understood what skills were needed, how the market was, the types of positions, when you could or how you could move, and then just like aggressively applying or networking and not always taking no for an answer, but also trying to find the right fit. Sometimes I gave in a little too early and I maybe wanted to stay at a company, but it was just like, hey, this company's paying me 20% more. I'm gonna like leave. So that was kind of how the income grew. Tactically, Grant Cardone at one point said, hey, save 40% of your gross salary. And I got really good at that. That then allowed for a stacked pile of cash to then buy another property in Austin in November of 2020. And so that is a 4-bedroom house. I house hacked that for about 3 years. And that income I then saved to buy another property. That one's in Canyon Lake. It's a short-term rental kind of mega property, right? Sleep 16, has a miniature golf course. And I leveraged my parents' debt-to-income ratio on that just because my DTI was tapped. I'll get tactical with this, but I want to share a personal story about this. And it's the beautiful part of like, it's not only just about chasing freedom, right? Because I was very much like, hey, parents, can you help me? Like, I want to, make money kind of at that time. But what I really found is that I invited my parents along the way to invest in a property with me, both in terms of the time we spent and the money that I put in. And they actually put some money into it as well. That I've seen them smile more in the past 3 years than I have in my entire life. And
Wow.
it's simply to say that like they just took ownership of it. They're in their early 70s for context. And so although I'm very appreciative of my story and love like how it's unfolded, it's also to say the emotional like progress and mindset changes I've had to go from me to we, and especially have that we be for a greater purpose than just income, has just been transformative, right? So I love also getting short-term rental messages of like, hey, thanks so much for, hosting us. This is the first time we've been, together in 4 years or something like that. I don't like the messages of like, hey, the sink isn't working or stuff, but you got to do what you got to do. It's just real estate. And so that's just a beautiful story to be part of the vision. And so that's been a fun property to have for a couple years. That also has some land. And so that's also been my strategy in terms of how I buy and what I buy, is there's always an additional leverage component. The Colorado condo was just the condo, right? And I really learned like there should always be something to leverage as best as you can. And so the Austin property has increased in terms of value. That Canyon Lake property has increased in value and, done well as a short-term rental. And then as I kept climbing, not necessarily climbing corporate ladder, but kind of just zigzagging, if you will, I then sold the Colorado property to abide by the two out of 5 year rule, right? So I lived in it for 2 years and out of the 5 years. Oh, but actually I didn't. I only lived there for a total of like 14 months. And because I kept going like in and out. And so I actually 1031 exchanged it. I then bought a property in Lago Vista, which is outside of Austin. That's a short-term rental that also has land by it, and have continued to expand that. And I'm looking to redesign and kind of develop and add more amenities there. So that's my portfolio: 3 single-family homes with additional land, and then I also raise funds for oil and gas. And so that's when there's been a little bit of equity, mainly cash flow though, that I've had from that. And then, come hopefully 2 weeks, I shoot you an email and tell you the great news that Lenders are going to give me some sort of second lien or something to leverage this equity, because there's amazing opportunities with the appreciation that I've had to then put that into maybe some properties here in Nashville or redevelop those current properties. So that's kind of my strategy of sorts, has been like help people and make good income with good investments. And then also, leverage as either I can or candidly the underwriting allows me to. And so sometimes that's really just been, I have a W-2 income. Here's my DTI. Can you loan me? Yes or no? And so that's been really easy convos as I've gotten more, self-employment, more complexities to it. And I don't want to refinance these because they're, super low interest rates. But yeah, that's just been my path tactically, and then kind of how I'm thinking of things now, and then what I'm hoping to leverage in the future.
Awesome. So where does your brain go with leveraging the land? I think that's super interesting.
Two things: one, practically, and one, being a 10-year-old with a credit card. So on one plot of land, I want to do like this lazy river that maybe has like a miniature golf course, like kind of extravaganza. And the other is just an additional structure. I'm balancing the equity play versus the kind of like joy factor, if you will, where it's like, hey, short-term rentals do take a bunch of time. There are certainly tax benefits and cash flow benefits, if you will, on it. But it's like, man, do I want more people to reach out to me? Because right now, again, I'm building my brand. The investors got to join, helping people more tactically, with kind of leveraging their finances or seeing how best I can help people do that. But it's that balance of, do I just put fund amenities so that the gross revenue and the net profit of this property is, double, right? Because that's at least the numbers we've gone under, or build another structure and, have like marginal returns, but there's appreciation there, but there's kind of cash flow here. Not to say it's a coin that I'll flip, but that's just how I'm thinking about it, is what's for the short term, what's for the long term, and this idea of what's the highest and best use. So it's a practice that I learned in commercial real estate. A parking lot could be sold for 400 grand, but sold to the right developer could be sold for 4 million because they, build a skyscraper. And, could some of those investments be changed, right? Could I put an above ground pool somewhere that eventually, sure, there's cost to it, but like could eventually move to then actually build a structure? So there's a difference between a short-term play, cash flow, build up reserves, and then deploy. That makes the most sense to me, because then what you're doing is you're creating flywheels of things, and you're having each property like be its own entity and its own thing, as opposed to, well, this one's losing, but this one, this, and all that sort of stuff. And then you're just having loss leaders, and then it's not like clean cut. I mean, yeah, straightforward in some ways, but that's just how I'm trying to do it, because then the banks also like that too. Here's the property, here's the bankroll, here's, all these things. It's all here, it works, and it's treated like a business. Sometimes I think as investors, I'm guilty of it, bleed too much of things, and then just maybe get in a situation where they have to just sell a property just so they don't go bankrupt or something like that, right? Because they've leveraged too much. And you and I probably have met maybe the same people or different people where like they have 7, 8 figure net worths, and they're like, hey, could you give me a loan for maybe like 40 grand on my house just so I can like pay bills? And it's like, what are we really doing here?
I love the idea of layering the short-term cash flow, like immediate cash flow with this play, long-term appreciation with that play, because I think it's nice to diversify in that way. Like
Hmm.
some opportunities are all about the long game, and that's great. But the
Yeah,
cash flow is what gives you the freedom sooner. And once you have the time freedom, then you can reinvest your time, which also equals energy back into new creativity, which can also affect the long game. So I'm a huge proponent of that as well. And I
yeah,
love how you said earlier that greater purpose than just income. And I've heard you say words like joy and fun and joy and fun and joy and fun, all the things. And I'm not to be too woo here, but I actually believe that when you chase joy,
yeah,
opportunities find you. And that if you can, for example, contribution, being of value to others brings people joy, right? We all feel good when we make somebody's day. And if we can
absolutely.
chase contribution, which also means chasing joy, I always feel like the dollars seem to follow.
Hmm.
Whereas in my experience, if I make dollars the object and I'm chasing money, even
Hmm.
though we love the idea of having abundance, because abundance and time freedom allows you to make a greater impact, right? But it's like
Hmm.
if you make the money the object of your desire in exchange, or you know yeah, as a trade-off of joy, then you
Hmm.
miss out on everything. And it also feels like a slog, but if
Yeah,
you make joy the object, a lot of times the money works itself out anyway. So speak to
Definitely.
me about your experience with that, because your podcast is called The Investor's Guide to Joy. So I am kind of curious about that.
Yeah. So, and specifically to your listeners, I'll tailor it to this. So, like, if you're a mortgage professional, real estate agent, or just investor in general, or some sort of mix, I want to tell you a story about maybe two of my properties, but we'll just say one, right? And it's to say that it felt like such like a transaction. It was lifeless. It was just like the thing. And it was like, okay, cool. Like, we'll see you later. Right. And then I see these other either agents or mortgage brokers or investors, right? They're like, congrats on this purchase. Like, hey, I got you this gift. Or like, hey, you really like tacos. Like, here's a gift card, right? We all know the value of referrals. We all know the value of word of mouth. And so ultimately, like the experience that you create and that you also exude to other people then allows them to feel and then is shared. People like people and they like good energy. Like there's 1,000, agents and investors and brokers out there that people can go to. And so it's just to say that like why would you do it or should you do it or not? And it's like I believe you absolutely should do it because you're then memorable. And I'm also of the belief like money doesn't matter. And that's a true belief in terms of abundance because I will continuously make more money than I've ever seen or can think of in my life. It'll always happen. It'll always make more money. However, there's certain moments and certain times that you can affect people's lives for the greater good with, simple thoughts or, actions. And those things I believe are truly transformative because in those moments, you potentially also wanted like those things as well. And so that like, hey, congrats, good job. One thing that I absolutely love asking people, and it's kind of funny to see how people squirm, not in like a rude or weird way, but just like, hey, like you did something amazing, right? I don't know, whatever it might be. Think of something you did recently. That's so awesome. What are you going to do to celebrate? Oh, I don't know. I probably won't do anything. Oh, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. It really seems like something you should celebrate. Yeah, I mean, I probably should. Oh, cool. Like, what do you think you would do? Like, I don't know. I kind of want to do this. It's like awesome. Like, seems like that's really important to you. And they're like, yeah, like, I think I'm going to do that. And it's like, cool. Right. And it's those things of just like giving yourself permission to even just like do some of those things. We work so hard and want to make like all this money. And then you have all this money and then like what is it for, right? You really want those relationships. And I believe the intention of like the investor's guide to joy is this concept of like there's two paths. There's like the becoming the millionaire, and then there's becoming someone who feels and acts and operates and gives generously like a millionaire but is not one yet. And money doesn't impact them, right? If a deal goes bad, wow, I learned a lot, or all these like different things, right? But there's just a different like heart posture and intention on it. And I found that when I had a different heart posture and intention, I had people like give me equity in companies. They're like, hey, I just want you to have this. And it's like, what the heck? Like, I didn't do enough. Like, I got to do more, right? And ultimately, that comes down to kind of like self worth and a number of different like mindset and emotional things we could go down the path of. But it's just this idea that I believe we truly want to like understand, love, care for ourselves, and do the things that we want to do, right? In utter joy and abundance, not necessarily the dollar amount. But we chase the dollar amount, one, because I think it's kind of fun. But as you go down that path, you realize it's super difficult and you might be able to get there better or faster by going down this path of joy, right? You could meet the person who could just give you 20% of the company on the plane because you asked how their day was and you like their shoes, right? You know what I mean? There's those kind of thoughts. And so in like in professions that are very number based, it's incredible to focus on like the people first, if you will, which I remind myself sometimes as well because I'm a very analytical person. So part of the other reason why I have the brand is just a reminder to myself of like focus on the joy. How can we, continue to be and go to joy?
It's so interesting you say this, because early on in my career, I remember my childhood friend's husband, who's also in the mortgage industry, and he would surf every morning, and then they would go to Hawaii for 2 weeks, and then it became 2 months, and then it became 4 months when their kids were little, and they'd put them in preschool over there. And I just watched him like live this life of awesomeness, right? At the same time that I was sort of becoming a workaholic and drowning in my own quote unquote success, where the money was good, but I was definitely not. And I
Hmm.
felt like I couldn't come up for air. I felt like I couldn't take a vacation without working. I was looking at this guy who was actually doing more business than me
Hmm.
while simultaneously living his best life. And I remember asking him, like, how do you do this? Like, I mean, even just the fact that you don't go to the office until 10 a.m. after you're done surfing. I mean, we all know he's not checking his emails on the wave, right? So, and he's
Sure.
like, well, what's the point of being self-employed? What's the point of working your ass off? What's the point of making good money if you're not gonna, if it's not to live an amazing life? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like we take the easy route when we forego the steady paycheck. We're taking the harder route by saying, I'm going to go out there and build this life of mine, but I'm never going to take a vacation. I'm never going to take a day off. I'm never going to shut my phone off. Like, it's so counterintuitive. And I remember that was such a turning point for me. It was way back in 2012. I just looked at him. I was like, gosh, you're right. And from that point forward, I started taking vacations without working unapologetically because, well,
Yeah.
am I designing a business that gives me a life, or am I designing a job where it's an albatross and it's just sucking the life out of me for the rest of my life in exchange for dollars? It's so interesting. It seems so common sense. And yet I'm sure there is somebody listening right now that's like, I haven't ever taken a vacation without working. And maybe
Sure.
it's time that you do, like, what's the
Yeah.
worst case scenario? You think 10 years from now you're going to have gone out of business because you took 2 weeks off to go to Hawaii and have an epic adventure? Like, you're not going to go out of business. In fact, people are drawn to the light. So go find the light and have some
Sure.
fun.
Especially in this line of work, because again, my parents would then in their Sunday school class be like, "Oh yeah, we told our Sunday school class about Canyon Lake, and Gene's been there, and Steve loves it, and all this stuff, right?" Like you have this connection. Hey, I'm going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. I won't respond to your email. Oh, what part? That's so amazing. Like you also have the opportunity to connect with people with the things you do. Like people want to interact with like the whole person than necessarily just the transaction piece. Also, please footnote for everything great in this world. Like if you're going to go on vacation, you're a mortgage broker, like agent, like tell the people you're working with. Cause man, I've had a couple frustrating things where it's like, what do you mean you're at an office for 4 days and like, we're not moving anything down the path? Just not good. They're always really good at start. And then you get close to the closing and it's just like, where'd you go? Maybe it's the, people I've been introduced to, but that's changed since then.
Somebody
But
listening who's an agent or a lender needs to contact Paul and be the next right arm in the
be the
transaction,
next,
because it sounds like
and
you've been burned, but
well, it's more of just like so I would to clarify what I believe like we're truly saying here is like I've not been burned by necessarily like the person. I've been interacting with someone who's burnt out. So the person who shows up at 10, who then is like, "Hey, how's your day? How's it going?" Right? There's a wonderful book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, being that like we should really show up as our true authentic selves and not be in a hurry because all the right things will work out for us. And we should also then be focused on what those right things are. And through that, it's not to say work a quadrillion hours, right? Maybe it's delegation. Maybe it's also just being more niched in terms of who specifically you work, with the best and want to, work with the most. But when you're at calm and peace and hey, how I can show up for you and oh hey, let me listen to you more versus like, hey, I got to get off this call and do all this stuff. Again, as it's more transactional, it then gets more kind of rigid and difficult. And then the challenge is when people are then snapping to say, hey, I got to take this vacation. I'm not, in office and there's not like a proactiveness kind of to it. It, if you will, shows that it's the first time it's your vacation because you have dropped the ball in some aspects and like, look, I'll try to help anyone that I can, but like me helping my own deal get across the table is like a little frustrating. I'll tell a situation where like the Lago Vista property, it was, a DSCR loan. We were planning to close in like, we have a 20-day like guarantee or something like that, right? Like easy, perfect. But just like wouldn't respond and just shorter story to say like, oh, hey, underwriting said we couldn't actually do it because it's a short-term rental and the long-term rentals rates don't work. I did this in the prequel, right, to say, hey, do you offer this, do all this stuff? But he was just kind of going through life and was just kind of burnt out, and it was towards the end of the year. I closed on December 13th, but in the span of 3.5 days, I called a bunch of hard money lenders, and we were able to get that in the same like week, right? So shout out to Kellen, but it's just that thing of like, it's not only like taking breaks, but it's creating those systems in your life to allow you to take breaks and you have boundaries and you have intentions, right? So I would think, he was like, hey, the night before, he probably did some stuff before he came into the office at 10 a.m., right? It wasn't just like, oh, sorry, I haven't looked at my email in 14 hours, right? Or whatever that timetable is. very something I'm passionate about, right? Because I just had some experiences, but it's just to say like it's truly taking care of ourselves, because if not, when we're hard on ourselves, I found that we're also like tough on others. And that just makes it difficult to be around from like a family perspective or business perspective. And so, again, focusing on more of that joy, what you're passionate about, things like that, it has just been so much more fruitful. Like to take the business meeting on a walk with someone, like, be creative, right? Again, invite people along the way. But there's just something that happens that did you have a moment where things just kind of like clicked and you saw this like whole new world, or was it like a progression for you in terms of like this lifestyle time freedom thing?
No, it snapped. I
Okay.
snapped.
Okay.
Burnout, just burnout. And it's like, I see people perpetuating a lifestyle of burnout and
Yeah.
convincing themselves is what they have to do. And they live in a world of should and have to and need to and can't. And
Mm.
in this
Yep.
journey, they're detaching from their soul and that purpose driven life. And so what
Yeah.
I found is that I did that. I lived like that for a long time. And I see a lot of people perpetuate that in their own lives and their businesses. And
Mhm.
what I usually like to say is that it's an illusion that we
Mhm.
are serving at the highest level our clients and our communities and our families when we operate like this, because they
Yeah.
deserve better. And to your point, we wouldn't work with a high level professional who is operating on us while also checking their social media and answering a quick call and checking that email and checking that and checking that. We want people to give us their full attention. And I think as real estate professionals, we need to challenge ourselves to say, am I truly operating at peak performance
Mhm.
when I'm running on fumes and checking my phone from the second I open my eyes till the second I close them at night? And I haven't taken a day off in 17 years, right? So it's like,
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
that there's an aspect to that where we also evolve as human beings. I think that as we make our way through different decades of our lives, our priorities shift, our energy changes, and our skills evolve, and our experience evolves
Mhm.
us. And I think it's a necessity to be constantly putting yourself back in the driver's seat to evaluate, what is it I want? What did I want when I started? And how does it look? How does my current reality match that vision? And then more importantly, do I still want the same things? Because I'm not the same person I was when I started. So I think it's
Yeah.
just challenging
Yep.
us as individuals to say, just because I used to enjoy that doesn't mean I enjoy it anymore. Just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I should be doing it.
Mhm.
And it's always time to bring everything back to the drawing board, clean slate, and be in the designer's seat for the future. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I would agree. And like, that's okay too, to change, to like different things, to try new things, etc. That's interesting to hear that yours was kind of more of a crack. Mine was kind of more of a progression, and kind of the vision kind of became more clear. But I think the big thing ultimately for either of us is just like we took steps toward it because we had some sort of vision of it and desire for it. And so we went down that path. In order to walk a mile, we need to walk, right? And make that sort of progression, because otherwise, we can't be surprised that we're not there when we don't know what we want. Or the other thing is like what we're willing to like sacrifice for it. And is that something we truly want, or is that something we think we want? Because I always thought hard work equals success. I had to grind. I had to be part of like 4 different companies and all these things. Because, we also have our consulting company too with the oil and gas fundraising, and that plus W-2 plus short-term rentals. Like, I would plan naps in the middle of my day just to like try to survive. And it's just so exhaustive. And it's like, for what? It's like, oh, well, it's just so I make enough money to then go do this thing. And there's this cool thing I have a blog on. It's kind of deep in my website because I've released so many blogs at this point, but it's called A Fish Climbs a Tree. And if you see a fish climbing a tree, it's a sight you can never unsee. But a fish that climbs a tree has the skills, knowledge, and resources to climb the tree, but it also has the unwavering belief that it can. And if at any point, like either of those things kind of waver, it's an opportunity for growth. And so I always thought I had to have enough cash flow to go do this business or go do this thing, when in all reality, it was, do I trust myself? Would I figure it out? Do I have the skills, tools, knowledge, resources, network to do it? And like, I felt overwhelmingly yes, more often than not. Now, most of my cash flow pays for the expenses, but I'm not going to a week and a half long Greece trip like I did last summer when I had a W-2. Phenomenal, by the way. But it's to say like how sometimes what we think is also the idea of like pursuing freedom. And oftentimes I believe people always think it's cash flow. And so I've always wanted to and continue to share of just like, it's not just cash flow, like it's also sometimes permission. And it's also sometimes the logistics, but all those three things totally allow you to do that. And then you just set boundaries. Hey, I don't answer emails on Saturdays, right? I promise you, I've personally found that people respect that more and you get more business and you're more refreshed because of that thing. Again, kind of a concept talked about in the Ruthless Elimination Hurry is like Sundays and having like a day of Sabbath and just like completely, just being as like a human and not kind of like a robot sometimes during the week or maybe all the time. But it's just a progression thing, at least for me. And that's interesting to hear. Yours is more of a snap. So
I want to respect your time. This is all good stuff. And if
mhm.
someone's listening and they want to learn more or learn from you, what is the best way to follow you, find you, connect, all the things?
Yeah, so on most of my socials, I'm Paul H. Graham, or it's Paul Graham on the handles. It's more to say like where do you operate socially? I'd love to connect with you there. I'm on a mission to like really help make social media more social. So like as you listen to Erin's podcast and something resonated with you or you wanted to talk about something, like I'd love to connect with you and not just have you listen to this and then just go into the ether, right? And I'm sure Erin believes the same thing of that feedback and just that interaction is like powerful for this. I do have the website Investor's Guide to Joy. It has a ton of blogs, articles about mindset and just perspective and belief, right? Kind of the fish climbs a tree. In I think we're like 80 articles now or something like that. Some finance articles and then also ebooks. So like 3-year vision or solo weekend, even ebook on like oil and gas investing. And so there's those tactical things. And I kind of alluded to this, but it's just to say like I'd be curious if people like desire in some ways to really get like tactical ways to like change the outcome that they desire, right? Like if it's more cash flow, here's like 8 different ways I've learned to like leverage finances or invest in things to, get in that from my personal experience, as well as through, being a GP or LP in different investments, that, just want to help people like experience more joy and understand what that's like, but also tactically get to it, right? I'm in the process of potentially building a like farmhouse with a slide, basically. Think of like a playground kid thing, right? Just because it's cool and I'm a 10-year-old with a credit card for my short-term rental. It's not my personal house, short-term rental. And so like those kind of things just really excite me where it's like a joy and income. And with that and a couple other things, I'm pretty confident we'll be able to double the income for that property. And so those things like really excite me. So that's kind of where to find me, what to find me about, and just, say hello, because that's what we're all here for. So
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Paul. I really appreciate it.
yes, Erin, thanks so much. I'm glad we were able to do this and just was so excited to share. It's just an exciting, joyful thing to share. So thank you.
Yes. And to all my friends out there pursuing freedom, I appreciate you guys checking this out. Have you left a 5-star review? Have you been listening for a while and you keep forgetting to do it? Because if so, I'm imploring you to please leave that review wherever you're consuming this content. It helps us continue to attract amazing guests like Paul and get this content found. And if you need help on finding that clarity, that purpose-driven life, hop over to pursuingfreedom.com. Check out all the resources there. Get on the email list so you don't miss any of the upcoming free workshops that I'm always throwing out there. And as always, I love you. I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.